Welcome back, everyone. I'm Katie,
I'm Dave.
and today we're going to explore the question, do we rest in downward facing dog or do we go deeper?
Good question. I've been asked that quite a few times in teaching classes, and yeah, it's been interesting to see where this journey leads us today, I think.
Yeah, before
Yeah,
we get stuck into it, thanks everyone for liking and subscribing. We really appreciate it. If you've got comments, feel free to pop them below, or if you've got questions, this is where we're really getting all the content for this from. So if
yeah,
you've got questions, feel free to email or pop them through social media or write them below.
absolutely. And just a quick reminder before we start that we offered a couple of weeks ago a code for our online content,
Our pre-recorded
our
classes.
pre-recorded classes, and we've still got a week of January left, and that code is still valid for that this next week coming. So if you wanted to check out the online content, by all means, just go in there. We'll drop the code into this somewhere. Go through. By the way, we've got a new setup today. I've got a bigger screen here, and it's really hard to stop looking at myself. So I apologise for that in advance, but our setup's a bit different. So I'll drop the code in and check it out by all means.
You're still checking yourself out?
No, I'm looking at you.
Let's get started then. So I think this is a really good question because often you hear that downward dog is a resting pose in class. I've even used that before myself in numerous classes, and usually it is when we do down dog after we've done a strong flowing sequence. So it's relative, I feel. It's relative to what you've just been doing. So if you've been doing something really strong and you go to a still spot in down dog, then potentially it is a rest. I also think it's quite subjective as well, because what I feel is a restful day might be getting up and meditating and then doing yoga and then going for a walk and then going out to lunch or
Yeah.
something like that, where you would probably prefer to chill out, watch TV, order pizza and lay low.
At 6 in the morning.
Yeah, you would be up at 6. So I think it's like relative to what resting is for you as well. So for me, when I think rest, though, true rest, it insinuates a level of comfort, a level of ease, and not much effort.
So ease and like steer and sukha
Mm.
could be.
Yeah, stira and sukha, which is in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, are yoga postures. We're trying to find this balance between stira or effort and ease,
Yeah,
comfort,
awesome.
which is sukha.
So we don't go deeper, is what you're sort of alluding to, or am I getting this the wrong way around?
Well, um, let's start by saying most people won't find downward dog a resting pose. So whether we want to go deeper depends on our body. It depends on the type of body we have. And I think we have for a very long time in the West glorified going deep in yoga poses and getting into really exotic postures.
You said whether we go deeper depends on our body type. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, so I'm going to generalize this to simplify it. And this is drawing from the work of Tom Myers, who's
Yeah.
a leader in fascia. And let's pretend the body is super simple and we have two types of bodies.
Right.
So we have the bodies that are descendant from Vikings, and we
Okay.
have the body types that are descendant from temple dancers.
So just in case you've woken anyone up who was sort of half listening, then you're not saying Vikings and temple dancers are part of the yoga. You're saying these are body types.
Body types,
Right.
yes.
Got it. Excellent.
So the Vikings, they tend to have denser fascia, which is less elastic, so they're more stable, where the temple dancers have looser fascia, so they've got more mobility there, more flexibility in their tissues, more elastic.
So how do I know which one I am?
I think it's pretty obvious you're a Viking and I'm a temple dancer.
You're making it. No, you're right. There's no assumption there at all.
So there's a couple of there's tests you can do, and one of them is if you take your hand towards your face and just take your index finger onto the pinky finger and start to draw the pinky finger straight back.
Okay, so if you're listening on podcast, you're holding your hand in front of your face and pushing the little finger, the pinky down. Is that correct?
Yeah. So if you get it past 90 degrees, it's So the angle is shorter than 90 degrees on the side between the top of the hand and the top of the pinky finger. That's pretty good range. So if we hold ours like this, so people can see, you can't tell, we're both about 90 degrees there. Yeah.
Just as a thing though, I'd have a what's that called?
Dupuytren's
A
contracture.
Dupuytren's contracture. Apparently, if you got that, I've heard that it means you have Viking ancestry. So she's probably on the money. But when I do that side, totally going nowhere fast.
Yeah, so that's a shortening of the adhesion of the fascia,
Yeah.
and it's it's that Viking thing's a myth.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's a myth.
Oh,
So the other test you can do is bringing your thumb down towards the wrist. So you're bringing the palm towards the wrist, and you're holding just onto your thumb and taking that towards the wrist, and that gives you an idea of your mobility there. So if you can get your thumb to your wrist, then you're quite loose.
oh.
So Dave's is about an inch away, mine's touching the wrist.
Awesome.
Yeah, so they're little tests you can do to have a look at your.
Is the Viking thing really a myth?
Oh, for Dupuytren's,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, I'm so disappointed.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So if our fashion's somewhere in the spectrum of either you're a temple dancer or you're a Viking, what's better for yoga?
Well, for optimal functioning of our joints, we want a balance of stability and we want a balance of flexibility and mobility as well. So interestingly, temple dancers tend to come to yoga and stay with yoga because they're very good at it, because they've got great range of motion.
Yeah.
However, if you're a temple dancer and you're going to a lot of classes where there's passive stretching,
Yes.
so you can think of like your
Like
yin,
yin?
yeah,
Yeah.
like yin.
Yeah.
You might want to revisit your practice schedule and make sure you're including enough stuff that's building strength and working at stability around the joints to support the joints, which the fascia, the connective tissue is lacking in that stability. So using your muscles to help support.
So what would be key, for joint functioning?
Key for optimal joint functioning is this balance between flexibility and stability. So flexibility, we can think of that as our capacity to move through different ranges, and flexibility can be seen as active flexibility or passive flexibility.
So what's active and what's passive?
So if we're looking at the shoulder joint, active is me moving my arm around by myself.
Yeah.
So I'm using my strength to take my
Yeah.
joint through its movement.
Yeah.
And passive, if you grab hold of my wrist, and then I'm just going to relax, and then you can take my arm around.
Okay, so I'm moving it.
Yeah.
So that's passive.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So like a twist. A twist, if I'm not using my hands, I'm using my core as I turn, or I can bring the hands down and I can use my hands to take me deeper into the pose.
Okay, so
first one active, second one passive.
So you're bringing your hands down, just for those that are listening, and you're twisting into a twist. Okay, from the chair.
Key for optimal joint functioning is flexibility. So we've just talked about active and passive flexibility. There might be I'm using the term flexibility, but we could talk about range of motion or mobility.
Yeah.
Sometimes those words might get used in this context. And then the other key thing is stability as well. So that's our capacity for our muscles to help stabilize our joints, not just the muscles. There's going to be there's passive and active here as well. So we have passive stability with, say, for example, the bones taking us into position, and the ligaments and the joint capsules holding us in position. But we really have a lot of control of is the muscles. And that's what we talked about before with a temple dancer. We want to make sure our muscles are firing properly and strong enough to help with a little bit more active stability in our joints.
So what's an example of joint stability?
So an example we quite often do in class is when we're balancing on one leg is engaging the hip stabilizers. The QR would tend to use is hug the outer hip in. So that helps rather than just sort of hanging in the joint where the pelvis might drop down on the other side. When you hug the hip in, the pelvis will stay level and supported, and you'll be more upright in your joints.
Okay. So also that's all great, but how does that transfer into downward dog?
I've just done, with the recordings, I've just done a tutorial on downward dog that looks at stability and mobility/flexibility for coming into downward facing dog. So you can practice that, and we'll talk about it though, so you can get a little bit of understanding of the logic behind my sequencing. So let's think about the joint positions in downward facing dog. We've got the shoulders in 180 degrees flexion.
Yeah.
So arms overhead. And this is challenging for a lot of people if they've got tight shoulders, whether that's lats and teres major, or if it's subscapularis or pecs or triceps.
Yeah.
And there's also upward rotation of the scapula there, so potentially maybe tight rhomboids.
So scapula, shoulder blades.
Yeah, shoulder blades. So we've got arm overhead flexion, 180 degrees. 180 degrees is around normal range, but not everyone's normal. Some of us are Vikings.
Apparently.
And then we've got hip range of movement, which is about 90-degree angle. So we've got flexion at the hips, and this can be a challenge for a lot of people too, predominantly from tight hamstrings. So we're talking about soft tissue restrictions here. We're not talking about bony restrictions, which obviously we can't change the bones, but we can definitely work with soft tissue to improve range of movement. So if you're working with soft tissue restrictions, things like passive stretching, like the yin classes, could be really good for these Vikings.
Yes.
And also there's other techniques as well, but active stretching, and there's a whole range of release techniques that you can use to work on the soft tissues. But to adapt the pose for people right now, what you can do is for the hips, you can think of bending the knees. So you take the pull out of the hamstrings and work at drawing the hips up and back. So the spine's nice and long. You get that beautiful axial extension through the spine. So often you'll find people with tight hammies and shoulders, it's more like they're in a plank position. So bend your knees so you can draw your hips up and back. So you're more in that triangle shape.
Okay.
And then you get that beautiful lengthening through the spine. The shoulders might still be a little bit restricted. So you could take the hands a bit wider, or maybe turn the hands out a little bit to help release some of the tension through the shoulders.
So that's really cool, but what about the temple dancer?
Well, the temple dancer, you wouldn't necessarily be going deeper because if they're doing that, they're potentially going to be laying in their joints and not using their active stability to support themselves, which is incredibly beneficial for building strength. As we know that tends to be an area they need to focus on, but also initially it will probably do nothing, but over time it could potentially cause irritation in and around the joints.
So how could they create stability there?
So there's a really great little adjustment that I've picked up along the way. I call it beach ball. I think it's called turbo dog as well. We do it with our arms. We can try it here with our arms out in front. Maybe not if you're driving, keep holding the steering wheel. But with arms out in front, you bend the elbows and they'll tend to go wide. And then we sweep the elbows towards the ground on a little arc. Until they're about shoulder width apart. And then you keep the elbows squeezing in like you've got a beach ball you're holding between them. And then start to push the hands away. So if you're in all fours or down dog, you'll be pushing the floor away. And start to straighten up the arms. They're not going to straighten completely while you squeeze the elbows in. You should feel quite a bit of work around the shoulders and the arms. So when from here, you can start to bring the arms up. And because we're working like they would be arms overhead in down dog, because we're working on stabilizing and strength, we're not going to get the full range of movement of the 180-degree flexion, but we're going to have nice, strong support around our shoulder blades here. We're going to be working serratus and lower traps, and you'll feel like the spaciousness around your neck that you want to achieve in down dog. This adjustment also just naturally takes the arms into external rotation, which is beneficial at preventing impingement in the shoulder. We do need to focus on grounding down with the index finger knuckle and the thumb knuckle because of that external rotation.
Wicked.
So with temple dancers, you'll often see them laying in their joints, and because of that, downward dog might feel like a rest. So back out of that, don't hang so deep, actually pull yourself out. Try that little beach ball trick. and focus on building strength around and support around the joints.
So, as a general, is downward dog a resting pose, or should you go deeper?
It can be a resting pose, and it's relative perhaps to what you've done earlier, and also subjective to the individual.
Yep.
If you're a Viking body type, work at increasing that soft tissue length. So yeah, do work towards going deeper and creating more freedom of movement. For temple dancers, it potentially is a rest already because you're perhaps just laying in the joints and not using so much muscular support. So back out and start to work your muscles a little bit more. And I'm sorry, it won't feel like a rest anymore, but it's going to be really good for your body.
Really good. That's awesome. Good, healthy work.
So,
I like it. All right. Well, thanks heaps, Katie. I guess that's pretty much covered it again for another episode. Now, guys, if you like that, please like and subscribe, and do send through comments and questions about stuff that we can approach on here.
yeah.
We're currently putting out a video a week, and we hope to keep that consistency up, just so that you've got something you can bring to your practice each week and that sort of thing. And don't forget, you should have hopefully seen the code go through somewhere during the session.
Yeah, join us on our pre-recorded classes.
Right, thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.